Okay, so in our last class, we've been able to see how to successfully register a new user using Firebase Authentication. Now, the next thing we want to do is to be able to log in an already existing user into our application. So how to do that is pretty much straightforward as well. So I'm going to go ahead and pull up our Android Studio, and I'm going to go to our login page. Now, the first thing we need to do is to go ahead and create new text editing controller. And this is going to be for our email and password test fields. So I'm going to have our email controller. So this is going to be equal to text editing controller. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new password controller. Okay, so now we have that out of the way. The next thing we need to do is to go ahead and assign the email and password controllers to the appropriate test fields. So I'm going to have to scroll down a little bit. So this is the password test field. So I'm going to go here and say controller, and I'm going to assign password controller to this test field. So I'm going to have to do the same thing for our email test field. So I'm going to have controller. So this will be email controller. Alright. Now the next thing we need to do is to go ahead and perform the login. But before we go ahead and do the login, we need to kind of do some input validation, because we don't want anybody to provide an invalid email address, things like that. So I'm going to go ahead and do some kind of validation here. So this is going to be an async. But before that, I can go to the registration page and copy our check for network connectivity. So this is always very important, guys. So I'm going to paste this here. So the reason why we are making use of copy and paste is to ensure that we're really moving fast, and I really encourage that you learn how to do some form of copy and paste in real world. Like, it really helps you go really fast with your development. So I'm going to go ahead and retype connectivity to bring in the connectivity package. Now the next thing I want to do is to go to our registration page and copy the show snack bar method. So if I scroll up to the top of this particular class, I'll be able to see the show snack bar method. So I'm going to copy alongside our scaffold key. So I will just have to replicate this inside our login page. So I'm going to go ahead and make use of this scaffold key here. So I'm going to have key, and I'm going to assign the scaffold key to the scaffold that we have on our login page. Right? So I'm going to scroll down a little bit. Now the next validation that we need to do will be for the email input. So we need to confirm that every email input contains the @sign. So if the @sign is not contained, we're just going to consider it as an invalid email address. So I'm going to say if not email controller.test.contains @ So if this is not true, I'm going to go ahead and say please enter a valid email address. And after that, I'm going to go ahead and exit this method. Alright, now the next thing I want to check will be our password. Our password needs to be at least 8 characters. Alright, so now that we have our validations out of the way, the next thing we're going to do is to do the login proper. So to ensure that our code is well organized, I'm going to create a new method that is going to take care of the login of the user. So here I'm going to go ahead and call this method login. Alright, so this method needs to have an async signature. Alright, so before we go ahead and perform the login, the first thing we need to do as usual is to have an instance of our Firebase authentication. So I'm going to have final Firebase auth. This is going to be equal to Firebase auth.instance. Alright, okay, so how are we going to do our login? So we can simply return back to our pub.dev.packages. So I'm going to go back to where I have my Firebase authentication. So what I have in mind is to look at the documentation once more, so that we can be able to know exactly what we need to do to be able to log in into our app. Alright, so I can easily go ahead and copy all of this and paste it here. So instead of having create user with email and password, I can change it to sign in with email and password. Alright, so this is basically all that we need to do to perform the sign in. Now to confirm if the login was successful, we can easily go ahead and say if user is not equal to null. So here we can go ahead and verify login. Now because we are trying to perform login, there are other things that we need to consider. So this very simple implementation will go ahead and authenticate our user. But there is something else that we need to check before we can successfully take the user to the main page. We need to first of all confirm that the user's information is saved or is existing on our database, right? So what I mean by that is, if you go to the users table, we should be able to see the user's information saved on this table. So this is more like a second check to confirm that this person is truly a user. Alright. Now what we want to do is to verify that the user's information is successfully saved on this particular reference. So we're going to have userref.once.then. So the value is going to be an instance of a data snapshot. So what we are doing with this line of code is to retrieve a data snapshot from this particular reference. Now the next thing we need to do is to confirm that this snapshot is not empty or is not null. If it's not null, it means that the user's information is existing on our Firebase database. So we're gonna have if snapshot.value is not equal to null. So at this point, we can now go ahead and send the user into our main page. So I can say navigator.push and remove until, and the route name is going to be mainpage.id, and bam. So to solve this issue, I can go ahead and convert this to a stateful widget. So how to convert this to a stateful widget is by holding down the options key and clicking enter. That is if you are on Mac. If you're using Windows, hold the alternate key and tap the enter button. So this seems pretty much all that we need to do. Now to finalize, I'm going to go ahead and call the login method inside our login button callback, right? So I'm going to go ahead and call this here, and that will be all. Now to verify that everything works just the way we expected, I'm going to go ahead and run this on our simulator. Okay, so our app is starting. Alright, now I'm going to go ahead and navigate to the login page. So I'm going to go ahead and provide my details. Alright, so now that I've successfully provided all our information, we're going to go ahead and click on login. And if our login is successful, it's going to take us to our main page. So let's go ahead and do that. Alright, I think there is an error here. Alright, so it's saying that if we look at the console, there is a platform exception that's saying error invalid email address. The email address is badly formatted. Alright, so this is where the issue lies. We didn't pass the appropriate email inputs. So this is supposed to be email controller.test, and this was supposed to be password controller.test. Alright, so now we're going to go ahead and handle the errors as well. Any error that could possibly arise from this. So I'm gonna have .catch error. Alright, so we can simply go to the registration page, and I'm going to go ahead and copy exactly what we did here without wasting any further time. So I'm going to go ahead and paste this here. So this is basically all that we need to do. So I'm going to go ahead and have platform exception here. Okay, so this is basically all that we need to do. So let's go ahead and run our app again. So our app has successfully restarted. So I'm going to navigate to our login page, and I'm going to provide the appropriate email address and the password. So let's go ahead and log in. And bam! So as you can see, our login is successful. So this is our main page. Now the final thing that we need to do to complete the login flow is to add a progress dialog, right? So when we click on the login page, we want to see a loading bar or a progress dialog that's going to communicate to us that our login is in progress. So I think that will go a long way to improve the user experience of our application. So that's exactly what we're going to be doing in our next class. So this will be all for now. See you in the next class.